This is History of Sexuality in the U.S., Lecture 3A, Part 1. Overviews of both this unit, Unit 3, on pathologizing and regulating sexuality, which I'll go over here, and then also an overview of today's video lectures, all here contained in Session 3A. As we start this new unit, we start our new book, and we take on some other topics that, though we've covered this era a little bit, we haven't necessarily engaged deeply. So, as you can see, what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks is go through arresting dress and move forward from the 19th century, but into the 20th century. So overlapping a bit with our last unit, but more focused towards the end of it and moving ahead a little bit. And so today I'll talk about the birth of the city and go up to about 1880 in that discussion. Then in our next session, we'll talk about the rise of sexology, a science of sexuality that came into being in the 1880s and 1890s. That science that begins as a very marginal set of ideas is going to move into the mainstream in the first decades of the 20th century, a moment that we'll call the invention of normal. An idea that, again, is going to go from an obscure intellectual concept to a dominant norm that's going to affect so many people's lives throughout the 20th century. Our focus on May 12th will be on that coming conformity and this shift into an era of really repressive stifling of sexual difference and diversity in the mid-20th century. Today, more directly and more focused, we'll be thinking about the birth of the city in about the 19th century up to about 1880. In video 2, I'm going to talk in big terms about urbanization and some of the ways that urbanization affects sexuality across the long span of the century and at the macro level in ways that we can trace through these new emergent methods in the late 19th century of statistical analysis. In Part 3, we'll talk about encountering difference and the way that cities stage this constant contact across all of the categories and boundaries that the legal system sought to erect. We'll see that that's one of the big appeals of the city, the opportunity to interact with people that you might not have seen before, but that this is also a profound source of anxiety that's going to lead to the imposition of regulation. And that's really going to grow in the wake of the Civil War as the city becomes seen as a site of vice. This term vice is going to be really important in the unit. It combines all kinds of different behavior into one lump that's a target of a lot of powerful authorities who want to clean up the city and make it a more respectable place. We'll end today in Part 5 by talking about Claire Sears's Arresting Dress, which will be the book guiding us through this unit. It focuses specifically on the end of the 19th century in San Francisco and the way that cross-dressing laws were an important way of drawing boundaries around race, sexuality, citizenship, and urban space. Her book is very focused. We're going to put it in the broader context in these video lectures, put it in a broader span of time, and try to think about pathologizing and regulating sexuality. That is, taking sexuality and turning it into something that's diagnosed as an illness. That's going to be especially crucial here. We're going to see the way that sexuality goes from a behavior that's evaluated in terms of its sinfulness or its lawfulness to one that's evaluated in terms of, is it normal? Is it healthy? And we're going to see at the same time that there are new regulations coming into place to ensure that some sexual practices receive the sanction, privilege, and benefits of the legal system, whereas others are put outside of it, and the people, the bodies, and identities attached to those practices then also get forced outside of that charmed circle. So you want to stay tuned on all of these videos as we dig in At the end of going through all of this, you have quiz 3A, which I'll talk a little bit more about in part 5. And there's also discussion 3A, which is based on that document analysis, which, if you've forgotten, is due by midnight on April 29. Stay tuned, keep watching, and keep learning.